When her heating broke and her marriage ended in the same week, she thought she'd freeze to death, until a neighbor's simple act of kindness changed everything. Lisa had always been the one everyone turned to when things went wrong. Her friends called her when they needed advice. Her family asked her to handle all the important decisions. Even at work, her boss trusted her with the biggest projects. She was the kind of person who kept everything together no matter what. But now, sitting alone in her big empty house on a freezing Tuesday night in January, Lisa felt like her whole world was falling apart. The house that used to feel warm and welcoming now felt cold and scary. Every room seemed too quiet. Every shadow looked different. The walls that once held laughter and family dinners now just echoed her footsteps. 3 weeks ago, her life had been completely normal. She woke up next to her husband of 16 years. They had coffee together. They talked about their daughter's school play and weekend plans. Everything seemed fine. She thought they were happy. Then came that terrible Friday evening. Her husband sat her down at their kitchen table and said words she never expected to hear. He wanted a divorce. He had been unhappy for years. He had already talked to a lawyer. He had found an apartment across town. He was leaving that weekend. Lisa remembered sitting there staring at his face, wondering if this was some kind of bad dream. But it wasn't. By Sunday night, half of their furniture was gone. By Monday, she was alone. The timing couldn't have been worse. That same week, the oldest, coldest winter in 20 years decided to hit their small town. The temperatures dropped so low that even the local news anchors seemed shocked. Everyone was talking about how brutal this winter was going to be. Then, as if the universe wanted to make things even harder, the heating system in Lisa's house broke down completely. She woke up on Wednesday morning and could see her own breath inside her bedroom. The thermostat read 42 degrees. When she called the repair company, they told her it would cost $3,000 to fix. Money she didn't have anymore. With the divorce lawyer fees piling up on her kitchen counter and her savings account getting smaller every day, $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. She tried to fix it herself, watching videos online and buying small space heaters from the store. But the house was too big, too old, and too broken. Her 10-year-old daughter Amy had been staying with her father since the heating broke. At first, Lisa told herself it was just temporary, just until she could get the heat working again, just until things got back to normal. But deep down, she was starting to wonder if anything would ever be normal again. Every night, Lisa wrapped herself in every blanket she could find and tried to sleep on the couch closest to the fireplace. But the cold seemed to go deeper than her skin. It felt like it was freezing her heart, her hope, her spirit. She had never felt so alone in her entire life. During the day, she went to work and pretended everything was fine. She smiled at her coworkers. She finished her projects on time. She answered emails and attended meetings. But inside, she felt like she was slowly disappearing, like the cold was eating away at who she used to be. The worst part wasn't even the cold or the money problems or the broken heating system. The worst part was the silence. The house had never been this quiet when her family lived there. There used to be music playing, television shows on in the background, Amy practicing piano, conversations over dinner. Now there was nothing but the sound of wind hitting the windows and the occasional creak of old wood settling in the cold. Lisa started talking to herself just to hear a human voice. She would comment on the weather while making coffee. She would read the news out loud. She would even have full conversations with Amy's stuffed animals that had been left behind. It made her feel less crazy, even though she knew it probably made her more crazy. Some nights she would drive to the grocery store just to be around other people. She would walk slowly through every aisle, not really buying anything, just listening to the sounds of normal life. Families arguing about what cereal to buy, couples planning dinner, kids asking for candy. All the ordinary sounds that used to annoy her now sounded like the most beautiful music. Her sister called every few days to check on her, but Lisa always said she was doing fine. She couldn't bring herself to admit how bad things had gotten. She had spent so many years being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who had all the answers. How could she tell anyone that she didn't even know how to take care of herself anymore? The loneliness was worse than the cold. The fear was worse than the broken heating. The feeling that she had somehow failed at the most important things in her life was worse than all of it combined. She had been married for 16 years. She had built what she thought was a happy home. She had believed in her family, and now it was all gone, as if it had never existed at all. Every morning she told herself that today would be better. She would figure out the heating. She would find a way to afford the repairs. She would start feeling like herself again. But every night she went to bed colder and more alone than the night before, wondering if spring would ever come again. Mrs. Wang had lived in the house next door for 37 years. She had watched the neighborhood change, seen families move in and out, and witnessed more stories of joy and sorrow than most people experience in a lifetime. She had a special gift for noticing when something wasn't right with her neighbors. For the past 2 weeks, she had been watching Lisa's house with growing concern. The mail was piling up in the mailbox. The newspapers were scattered on the front porch. Most telling of all, she could see Lisa's breath fogging up the kitchen window every morning when she made her coffee. Mrs. Wang knew what a broken heating system looked like, and she knew what a broken heart looked like too. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Wang made a decision. She prepared a large pot of her famous chicken soup, the kind that had comforted her own family through countless difficult times. She also grabbed the old electric heater from her basement, the one her late husband had bought 20 years ago. It wasn't much, but it was something. When she knocked on Lisa's door, she could hear footsteps hesitating on the other side. Lisa finally opened it, and Mrs. Wang was shocked by what she saw. This vibrant woman she had known for years looked like a shadow of herself. Her face was pale, her eyes were red from crying, and she was wearing 3 sweaters layered on top of each other. Lisa tried to smile and act like everything was normal. She invited Mrs. Wang in for coffee, apologizing for the cold house and making excuses about the heating repair being delayed. But Mrs. Wang had lived too long and seen too much to be fooled by polite conversation. She set down the soup and plugged in the heater without asking permission. Then she did something that surprised both of them. She sat down at Lisa's kitchen table and started talking about her own life. She told Lisa about the year her husband died, how she had felt so lost and cold that she thought she might never feel warm again. She talked about the divorce her daughter went through and how hard it was to watch someone you love fall apart. As Mrs. Wang shared her story, something magical happened. Lisa stopped pretending to be okay. The walls she had built around her emotions started to crumble. She found herself talking about things she hadn't said out loud to anyone. She talked about how scared she was about money. She talked about how much she missed Amy. She talked about how angry she was at her husband for giving up on their marriage without even trying to fix it. But mostly she talked about the cold. Not just the physical cold from the broken heater, but the deep, aching cold that seemed to live inside her chest. The cold that made her feel like she was disappearing. The cold that made her wonder if she would ever feel happy again. Mrs. Wang listened without judgment, nodding at all the right moments and making small sounds of understanding. She had been where Lisa was. She knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is simply witness their pain, without trying to fix it or explain it away. As the afternoon turned into evening, Lisa found herself feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not exactly warmth, but the absence of that terrible freezing feeling. It was like sitting next to a campfire after being lost in the woods. The fire might not make you completely warm right away, but it gives you hope that warmth is possible. When Mrs. Wang finally got up to leave, Lisa walked her to the door. As her neighbor stepped out into the cold night air, Lisa felt panic rising in her chest. The thought of being alone again, of facing another night in the cold, empty house, felt overwhelming. Without thinking about it, without worrying about how it would sound or what Mrs. Wang would think, Lisa spoke from her heart. Her voice was barely above a whisper, vulnerable and raw with honesty. "Can I slip under your blanket? I just can't get warm," she said. Mrs. Wang turned around and looked at Lisa with eyes full of understanding. She had heard those words before. Maybe not exactly those words, but that feeling behind them. The desperate need for human connection. The exhaustion of trying to be strong all alone. The simple, basic human need for warmth and comfort. Without saying anything, Mrs. Wang opened her arms. Lisa stepped into that hug and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safety, acceptance, the warmth of another human, being who cared about what happened to her. They stood there in the doorway for a long time. 2 women who had found each other at exactly the right moment. One who had learned how to survive life's hardest challenges, and one who was just beginning to learn that survival was possible. The next morning, Lisa woke up on her couch to find a thermos of hot coffee on her front porch, along with a note that simply said, "You are not alone." It was the first morning in weeks that she didn't feel completely hopeless. News travels fast in small neighborhoods, especially when it's carried by someone like Mrs. Wang who genuinely cares about people. By Friday afternoon, word had quietly spread about Lisa's situation, not as gossip or pity, but as information that good people could act on. The first person to show up was Tony from across the street. Lisa barely knew him except to wave hello when they saw each other getting their mail. He was a retired electrician who spent most of his time working in his garage or tending to his garden. She had always thought of him as the quiet type who minded his own business. But there he was on Saturday morning, standing on her front porch with a toolbox in one hand and a bag of parts in the other. He explained that Mrs. Wang had mentioned her heating system was down, and he wanted to take a look at it. Maybe it wasn't as expensive to fix as the repair company had said. Maybe he could help. Lisa was embarrassed. She tried to explain that she couldn't afford to pay him right now, that money was tight with the divorce and everything. Tony just smiled and said he wasn't looking to get paid. He said neighbors help neighbors, and that's just how things should be. While Tony worked on the heating system, making trips to the hardware store and muttering to himself about these old furnaces, other neighbors began to appear. The young couple from 2 houses down, Jake and Maria, brought over a stack of extra blankets and a casserole dish that smelled like heaven. They had only lived in the neighborhood for 6 months, but they said they knew what it was like to struggle when you're just starting out. Lisa's co-worker Jennifer showed up with groceries and an offer to drive Lisa to and from work until her car situation got sorted out. Lisa hadn't even mentioned that her car was having problems, but Jennifer had noticed her walking to the bus stop in the freezing cold every morning. The most surprising visitor was 8-year-old Kevin from the house behind hers. He came to the back door with his mother, carrying a small space heater and a plate of homemade cookies. Kevin explained very seriously that his mom said Lisa might be cold, and he knew what it was like to be cold because his room was always the coldest in their house. Each person who showed up brought something different. Some brought practical things like food or blankets or help with repairs. Others brought something less tangible but equally valuable. Conversation, laughter, the simple presence of another human being who cared. Lisa kept trying to thank everyone, to apologize for needing help, to promise she would pay them back somehow. But every person said the same thing in different ways. This is what neighbors do. This is what people do. You would do the same for us. By Sunday evening, Tony had worked a miracle. The old heating system was humming quietly, pushing warm air through the house for the first time in weeks. The temperature on the thermostat climbed steadily from 45 degrees to 55 to 65 to a comfortable 72. But more than that, Lisa's house felt different. It felt alive again. There had been people coming and going all weekend. There had been conversations and laughter. There had been the sounds of normal life, tools clanking, footsteps on the stairs, voices calling out questions and answers. For the first time since her husband left, Lisa felt like she might survive this. Not just the cold or the money problems or the loneliness, but all of it. The whole overwhelming mess that her life had become. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could build something new from the pieces that were left. As February melted into March, something unexpected started happening to Lisa. The woman who had always been everyone else's rock was slowly learning how to be her own foundation. It started small, with tiny moments of confidence that grew bigger each day. Jennifer at work had mentioned a support group that met at the community center every Tuesday night. At first, Lisa made excuses. She was too busy. She was feeling better now. She didn't need that kind of help anymore. But Jennifer kept mentioning it, not pushing, just letting Lisa know the option was there whenever she was ready. One particularly difficult Tuesday, after Amy had called crying because she missed their old life together, Lisa found herself driving to the community center instead of going straight home. She sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, watching women of all ages walk through the front doors. Some looked confident and put together. Others looked exactly like Lisa felt, uncertain and a little broken. The meeting was held in a circle of folding chairs in a room that smelled like coffee and hope. There were 12 women there that night, all at different stages of rebuilding their lives after divorce. Some had been coming for years and served as gentle guides for newcomers. Others were attending their first meeting, clutching tissues and looking around with the same nervous energy Lisa felt. When it was time for introductions, Lisa almost left. But something about the way the other women shared their stories, honest but not bitter, sad but not hopeless, made her stay. When her turn came, she simply said her name and that she was recently divorced. That was enough for now. Over the following weeks, Lisa found herself looking forward to Tuesday nights. She learned that the angry, confused feelings she'd been having were completely normal. She learned that other women had survived situations that seemed impossible and had come out stronger on the other side. Most importantly, she learned that healing wasn't a straight line from broken to fixed, but a messy, complicated journey with good days and bad days. The group became a safe place where Lisa could be honest about her struggles without feeling like she was burdening anyone. She could talk about how scared she was about money without someone trying to immediately solve her problems. She could admit that some days she still missed her old life without being told she should be grateful for her freedom. But the most powerful moment came during her fourth meeting, when a new woman joined the group. Her name was Carmen, and she had just moved out of the house she'd shared with her husband for 22 years. She sat in the circle looking exactly like Lisa had felt that first night, lost, scared, and completely overwhelmed. When Carmen started talking about how cold and empty her new apartment felt, how she couldn't sleep without hearing another person breathing in the house, Lisa felt something shift inside her chest. She recognized every word, every emotion, every fear. Without thinking about it, she found herself speaking up. She told Carmen about the night she had whispered to Mrs. Wang about needing warmth. She talked about how the kindness of neighbors had saved her during her darkest weeks. She shared the small daily practices that had helped her start feeling human again, making her bed every morning, calling Amy before school, taking walks around the neighborhood even when she didn't feel like it. As Lisa spoke, she realized something amazing was happening. The woman who had spent months feeling completely helpless was now helping someone else feel less alone. The wisdom she was sharing had been earned through her own pain, and that made it real and valuable in a way that advice from books or experts couldn't match. Carmen listened with tears in her eyes, nodding at everything Lisa said. After the meeting, she approached Lisa with a shaky smile and said, "Thank you for making me feel less crazy. I thought I was the only one who felt like this." That night, driving home through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in months: pride in herself. Not the kind of pride that comes from achievements or accomplishments, but the deeper satisfaction that comes from knowing you've grown as a person. She had survived something that felt impossible, and now she was using that survival to help someone else. The support group started meeting at Lisa's house after a few more weeks. Her living room, which had felt so empty and cold during those terrible January nights, was now filled with the voices of women supporting each other through life's hardest challenges. Mrs. Wang often joined them, bringing her endless supply of wisdom and homemade treats. Amy, who had started spending weekends with Lisa again, would sometimes peek into the living room during these meetings. She was proud of her mother in a way that was mature beyond her 10 years. She could see that her mom was becoming someone stronger and braver than she had been. Before the divorce, Lisa began to understand that the warmth she had been searching for during those freezing winter nights wasn't something she could get from another person or even from a group of people. It was something that had to be rebuilt from the inside out, brick by brick, day by day. The kindness of others had given her the foundation and the tools, but the actual work of becoming warm again was something only she could do. She started taking better care of herself in small ways. She bought herself flowers for the kitchen table. She took long, hot baths on Sunday evenings. She started cooking real meals instead of just heating up whatever was easy. She began to treat herself with the same kindness she would show a good friend going through a hard time. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. The woman who had felt like she was disappearing during those cold January nights was becoming more herself than she had been in years. Not the version of herself that had tried so hard to keep everyone else happy, but a newer, more authentic version who knew her own strength and wasn't afraid to ask for help when she needed it. By the time the first warm day of spring arrived in late April, Lisa's house had become the unofficial heart of the neighborhood. The Tuesday night support group had grown to include women from 3 different towns. Mrs. Wang had started a small garden in Lisa's backyard, teaching Amy how to plant vegetables and flowers. Tony still stopped by regularly to check on various household repairs. But now he stayed for coffee and conversation. The house that had felt like a cold, empty shell just 4 months earlier was now filled with life in ways Lisa had never imagined. There were always people coming and going, women from the support group stopping by to check on each other, neighbors dropping off mail or borrowing tools, Amy's friends playing in the backyard. But the most meaningful change was in Lisa herself. She had discovered that surviving something difficult doesn't just make you stronger. It makes you kinder, more understanding, and more grateful for the ordinary moments that used to feel boring. She noticed sunsets now. She appreciated the sound of rain on the roof. She felt genuinely happy when Amy laughed at something silly on television. One warm Saturday morning, Lisa was working in her garden when she noticed a moving truck parked in front of the house at the end of the street. A woman about her age was directing the movers, looking stressed and overwhelmed. Lisa recognized that expression immediately. It was the same look she had worn for weeks after her husband left. Without hesitation, Lisa walked down the street and introduced herself to the new neighbor, whose name was Rachel. She learned that Rachel was recently widowed and had moved to town to be closer to her adult children. She was trying to start over in a place where she didn't know anyone. Feeling lost and alone, Lisa invited Rachel for coffee, and as they sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where Mrs. Wang had first listened to her story months earlier, Lisa found herself offering the same kind of unconditional support she had received. She listened as Rachel talked about how hard it was to sleep in a new place, how everything felt different and scary. When Rachel's voice started to shake as she talked about how cold and empty her new house felt, Lisa knew exactly what to do. She had learned from Mrs. Wang that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer someone is simply your presence and understanding. As the afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen windows, warming both women as they talked, Lisa realized that the circle was complete. She had gone from being the person who desperately needed warmth to being someone who could provide it for others. The kindness that had saved her during her darkest time was now something she could pass on. That evening, as Lisa prepared dinner and Amy practiced piano in the living room, she thought about how different her life looked now compared to those terrible January nights. The support group would be meeting in her living room on Tuesday. Mrs. Wang would probably stop by tomorrow with vegetables from their garden. Tony had promised to help her fix the squeaky front door next weekend. But most importantly, she had learned that true warmth, the kind that lasts through any season, doesn't come from having a perfect life or never facing difficulties. It comes from the connections we build with other people, the kindness we share, and the strength we discover within ourselves when we thought we had none left. As she tucked Amy into bed that night, her daughter asked her a question that made Lisa smile. "Mom, are you happy now?" Amy's voice was curious but also a little worried, as if she was afraid the answer might change tomorrow. Lisa thought about the question seriously before answering.